Dean Legge show for the week of Georgia's game with Troy. Georgia losing the South Carolina game they definitely shouldn't have lost. That they were the better team in, and that they figured out how to lose. Everybody, I think, and certainly rightfully so, talking about the play call on first and goal from the 4-yard line for Georgia. Mike Bobo doing one of his, trying to get one of his passes in the flats. So the call, after it doesn't work, any play call, the person who calls the play looks like an idiot. I think people who are saying that Mike Bobo doesn't know what he's doing, or is just like, they're just so either immature or ignoring fact completely. Georgia didn't just magically get 35 points on the scoreboard. That had a direct result of what Mike Bobo had to do with the preparation of that game, as well as the play calling in that game. Other thing, too, I don't think you should complain about officiating, but I did have someone close to the Georgia program after the game say, Georgia's good, but they can't overcome officiating calls like that. And I didn't really pay too much attention to it because on the field it's tough for me to see everything. But the officials certainly did miss that call on Brandon Cubilano. I don't think there's any question about that now. Chip Towers at the AJC has reported that Georgia got word back from the SEC that the SEC missed that call. You start taking points off the board like that, particularly momentum points, and the game changes. There's no question. So maybe Brandon doesn't have to take the guy to the ground. Maybe it was a matter that he just got tripped up. But, listen, Georgia's where they're at right now. They don't need to be complaining about officials. Part of football is bad officiating. If you play long enough, you're going to get some tough ones. I thought that Todd Gurley definitely could have gotten called for a personal foul in the third quarter, whenever it was, but he didn't, and that kept the Georgia drive alive. So to some degree, my old college coach, we were talking not that long ago, and he just said to me, you basically have to ignore the officials as best you can and just push your team forward because that's all you can control. You can't control if they're going to call a hold or not, particularly on a 50-yard or 60, 70-yard play, whatever that was. All right, I do have a couple of questions. I didn't take questions this week just because I got so behind with everything. Anyhow, it was just one of those weeks. I see my cat walking right. Here comes the cat. All right. This is a highly produced operation here. All right, so let's get to the questions. UGA Dog Forever 08 says, Dean, in your opinion, do you see a high-end talent issue on the defensive line? No, I think they're pretty good. I don't know if they're – I sort of don't know how you mean with that question. Let me take a stab at it, though. I think that the defensive line was going up against one of the better lines they'll deal with this year, if not the best. Sort of like Georgia's offensive line went up against one of the better, if not best, front sevens against Clemson. Steve Spurrier, nobody that's a Georgia fan or person wants to hear about how great Steve Spurrier is, and that's fine. But the reality is that he definitely maneuvered South Carolina in a way offensively that prevented Georgia's pass rush. Whether it was that when South Carolina was going to throw the ball, they kept the tight end in a lot more often than they let that person out, and he flexed Mike Davis out probably almost a whole drive. So he saw something he liked and he stuck with it. He's a great play caller. But the problem for South Carolina is, frankly, their quarterback, you can say how great he is if you want to. I do not believe that. He made 4 critical mistakes, and Georgia got 3 points off of them. The next time he makes 2 mistakes, if somebody gets 14 points off of him, if Georgia had only gotten 10 points off of him, if Swan takes that ball into the house, Georgia wins that game. That stadium was completely deflated when he turned that ball over. The other thing is, too, listen, straight up, Marshall Morgan's just got to hit those kicks. He's a very good kicker. He's an excellent kicker, but he's a kicker. And, quarterbacks miss 10-yard outs as well, and little dump screens So your kicker's going to miss kicks occasionally. You have to be so much better in the SEC than everybody else every single week. That's how you don't lose. That's why there's no undefeated seasons in this conference. It's because guys miss 20-yard kicks. It's because South Carolina gets blown out at home to open the season. It's because the schedule is brutal. It's because you have to go on the road. So you have to be a pragmatist about this. You have to go forward knowing that your situation is, if you're Georgia, if you want to get to Atlanta, you probably have to stay perfect in the East from this point forward. Certainly that would help you get to the playoff, but that should be the least of anyone's concerns right now. So I think that on the defensive line, do they have a high-end guy? I'm trying to think of the last, first-round draft pick on the defensive line that Georgia's had, and I'm having a hard time. I mean, Geno Atkins was a third-round guy. John Jenkins was a third-round guy. Kedrick Golston was a heck of a player. He was a sixth-round guy. So I think you got to go back, and this is off the top of my head, to Jonathan Sullivan more than a decade ago. So some of it's, that. But look at Toby Johnson had a great game. I think Sterling Bailey is going to be a very good, what looks like 3-year starter. And Ray Drew, I don't remember him sticking out against South Carolina. So, but those are just three guys. Georgia's going to get to the point where everybody's not going to keep max protection in, and Georgia's going to get that pass rush. So the defensive line, in terms of skill, is not, say, what Georgia's running backs are, obviously, at their position, but it's not the end of the world either. I mean, I think their defensive line is pretty good, but you're asking about high-end talent. No, it's not. I don't think there's any I don't know that there's any first-round guys on that group. UGA Dog Forever 08 says, do you think Georgia has hard luck in recruiting dominant defensive linemen? Well, I don't believe in luck, but I do think that they have this is the third defensive line coach in 3 years. And that does, the last two have been very good, and Rodney certainly wasn't bad. You have to recruit consistently at a high level on the lines. Because why? Because you only need one quarterback. You need 3 defensive linemen or 4. You need 5 offensive linemen or 8. So that's the thing, is that there's more of those guys. And that's probably what separates, I think Georgia's pretty good in general. I think they have a very good offensive line. I think what separates the SEC schools, Georgia right now, South Carolina, Florida to some degree, certainly in the recent past, Alabama, LSU, etc., Auburn, when they're good, is the line play, both lines. And so Georgia people don't compare themselves to Georgia, Southern or Indiana or whoever. They compare themselves to their cartel members in the SEC. And so I think the offensive line at Georgia is as good as anybody in the conference. And people can laugh at that. They're not giving this group credit. I mean, Hudson Mason's the quarterback at Georgia. Aaron Murray's the quarterback at Georgia. And these guys are scoring almost 40 points a game. So that you can't ignore that. The defensive line at Georgia has not been what people would like for it to be. I think it has the potential in the future to be pretty good with Ledbetter, Rivers, and Trenton. But those are just 3 guys, and in recruiting, you can't count on but probably about a third of your class to be a legitimate. I mean, if you get in a third of your class to be legit players, you're doing a great job, because it just doesn't happen. And so you're seeing guys like Uriah LeMay, Christian LeMay, Devin Bowman, Ryan Rankin, even J.J. Green. You're seeing guys like, Keith Marshall may fall into that category eventually, but I think it's way too early to say that about him. You get guys that are ranked low, and you get like J.J. and Ryan Rankin and even Brendan Douglas, who have moments and then they go away. You have guys like high-level guys like, everybody always says Marquise Elmore, but that was years ago. Those guys are gone, and a lot of times we didn't have the data. We didn't know as much back then. But you get guys that fail on the lines because that's a tough. I mean, you can develop guys, and offensive line is tough. Defensive line, you can see it a little bit more. But I think for Georgia, lately it's easy to remember who they've forgotten. I mean, Dontavius Russell, they had him locked out and locked up, and he went to Auburn. Grady Jarrett has been a very good player for Clemson, etc. Vic Beasley at Clemson has been a very good player. But, look at Georgia, you can't have all 5-star guys. You can't have all 4-star guys because everybody's not that good. So you have to have guys like David Andrews, guys like Grady Jarrett at Clemson that are 3-star guys who are 3- and 4-year starters who have come a long way. And so what we're seeing is at Georgia, I think the defensive line is very good. I think that the issue is the secondary. I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, when Mark Richt is saying it over and over again, as long as he is, he's trying to say it in a nice way that those guys have either got to get a lot better or we've got to scheme in a way that we can make them better. But, when you're out there playing, and you got to deal with what you are. Some of us were not overwhelmingly talented athletes, so we would hold and we would, cheat as much as we could to try to level the playing field. In the SEC, somebody like A.J. Green is going to just slap your hands away if you're trying to hold them. They're going to run down the field and score touchdowns. Same thing with Todd Gurley. He's just going to run you over. So, comparatively speaking, the secondary at Georgia has got to get nominally better. It's got to get better. And the front seven's got to pick it up for them. They got to have games. I mean, Mike Bobo's offense is probably going to have to score almost 30 points every single game to win. And I think that's not a knock on Jeremy Pruitt. That's just reality right now. And I think we see that, Clemson scored 21 points. So if Georgia had scored 20, they would have lost that game. So it does look like, for me, for right now, particularly if they're going to win the East, Georgia's going to have to score 30 points a game. Doesn't seem like that's a huge issue. They've scored 30 points a game for a lot of the SEC, the last 3 years, 4 years almost, 11, 12, 13, 14 now. So, but they need a combination where when they don't score, like when they played Florida in 2012, they can win the game. That's what they are going to have from the defense. I think the defense did do that against Clemson, but Clemson's a scrimmage. It's not a real game. Real games are conference games. If Georgia had lost to Clemson and beat South Carolina, it'd be a different ballgame right now because they would completely control everything. So, but listen, South Carolina ain't running the table. Everybody knows that. And Georgia might not either. But we know South Carolina's not going to run the table. Here's a question about Bryce Ramsey. I'm sorry, I'm having to answer text right now in the middle of this thing. Do you see Bryce Ramsey getting snaps against Troy? He better. I mean, he's the backup quarterback, and him and Boughton need to play. I mean, Bryce is almost certainly going to be the starter in 2015 and 16, and wherever if he's there in 17. But it's time to I want to see what Bryce Ramsey is like when he has a legitimate running back with him and he's not handing it off to a walk-on, or see his ability to it's not about physical ability with Bryce. It's not about if he has the ability to make the out throw or the throw down the seam or anything like that. That's not what it is. I want to see if a kid who, like Jameis Winston, like Joe Flacco, like some of these guys that came from a wing T, does he now have the ability to turn his back to the defense, fake the play action pass, the play action. Excuse me, fake the running back so you can do the play action. And can he process that information now? Can he go from 1, 2, 3, and 4? Can he get to number 4? If number 1 is there, is he going to say? If number 1 is not there, is Bryce going to say, "By God, I've got a huge arm and I'm going to throw it to that guy anyway because I can do that because I'm Colin Kaepernick and I think that I can fit it in anywhere"? Well, you can't. So the question is he going to make plays with his feet? He's drastically more athletic than people think. Is he going to make plays with his feet in the pocket? What I'm saying is, can he slide up and move forward gracefully in a way that will allow him to turn his shoulders and throw the ball effectively? Is he going to make the right read? People are going to get on Malcolm Mitchell. That's why Justin Scott. That's why Chris Conley and Michael Bennett have had great careers at Georgia, because people were dealing with Tavares, people were dealing with Malcolm, people last year were dealing with Justin Scott Wesley. So your number 4 and 5 guys, they can get a lot of passes. They can't get passes if you're trying to force it into the 1. So that's the question. The question is not, does he have physical ability? He's probably the second best, maybe on near par with Matthew Stafford in terms of physical ability. That's not the question. The question is, can he process information the way in which you need to succeed in the SEC? The conference is not about the best physical ability. You got to have that. But that's sort of like Lauryn Hill saying that's just the minimum. You got to then go play. And you got to correctly diagnose where the ball should go. And for Bryce, I think that has been the challenge over the last year and a half. I mean, he wasn't going to come in and start in 2013. Everybody knew that. It was very unlikely that he was going to unseat a fifth-year senior, particularly one who had 2.5 to 3.5 games experience the season before, 2 of those games as starters. So it was unlikely that Bryce was going to be the starter coming into this season. It's likely he's going to be the starter next year. And this is a stretch of games here with Troy and certainly with Vanderbilt, I think, that he could play in these games and get legitimate practice for what his life is going to be like. But that's what I'll watch. I'm not going to watch to see if he has a strong arm. He has a strong arm. He has an NFL arm. I mean, he has a special arm. He is a special physical talent. What has to happen is that Mike Bobo has to guide Bryce Ramsey to where Bryce has got to go. And if you could take Hudson's brain and put it in Bryce's body right now, Georgia probably blows a lot of people out. And that's not knocking Bryce's brain. That's saying in a 5-year stretch, there's a lot of things Hudson knows and has seen that Bryce has not. So I want to see, can he move? I want to see his ability to move inside the pocket. I want to see when a pass rush is coming from the outside. Does he freak out? Does he step up and throw it? Does he take the hit sometimes? Does he know that sometimes he's got to throw the ball out of bounds? We don't know anything about him. We've seen Tom Balta play. And in game situations, it's been a little bit limited. He relies on his legs a lot. You can't do that in the SEC. You're not going to make it, in my opinion. So particularly someone of his size. He's not as big as Tim Tebow, something like that. People compare him occasionally to Tim Tebow on message boards. Tim Tebow is my size, if not bigger. And, he's huge. And so that's a guy that if you weigh 240 pounds, you're not going to be worried about getting hit by someone who's 240 pounds. The lower you weigh and the shorter you are, those guys get hurt for whatever reason. So ask Mike Davis about playing in the SEC. Ask Todd Gurley about playing in the SEC. Ask TJ Yeldon about playing in the SEC. Those guys are running backs, but quarterbacks get hit too. And if you're trying to run as a quarterback, it's tough. You can do it, and you do have to run sometimes. But so that's the big, my big thing this week against Troy for Georgia is I'm most curious to see Bryce Ramsey play. Is he? I mean, he's the backup, but will he be the second quarterback to take snaps, or are they going to go with Balta because Balta's older? I don't know. And I think that my suspicion is it will be Bryce. But if you're Mike Bobo, I mean, it doesn't make any difference to you who goes in the game when. You just want to see them both play. But I would be curious to see Ramsey get in there and Keith Marshall. I don't think J.J. Green's as good as Dominique Sanders, but I do think he should have the ability to go out there and try to get some more snaps in the secondary just to see if there's something there. Same thing with Malcolm Parrish. I think you seriously consider playing Kenneth Williams if you think that it's going to be a lot longer with Malcolm and Justin. I don't think it will be. I think Justin will play against Vanderbilt. Malcolm, I don't know about Malcolm, but Justin, I think, will play against Vanderbilt. I think you can read between the lines there if you want to. That's the 5th game of the season. But my expectation is that Justin will play. And that will help Georgia, but in order to beat, Missouri, in order to beat Florida, Auburn, etc., they need those receivers because as good as Michael Bennett and Chris Conley are, they are not as good as they can be without those other 2 guys on the field. And I mean, that's just common sense. I mean, I think we all know that. And it retards Hudson's maturation process too, not having those guys out there. So, I thought it was a loss. Georgia it was a game they had no business losing. They are better. They were better than South Carolina. They lost the game. There's any number of reasons why. Mainly, I would say because the defense did not do enough to win, period. And, you can say they had a tough call on that holding call. That's true. You can say Mike Bobo goofed up on first down. Well, they still had 3 downs after that. You can say Marshall Morgan missed a chip shot field goal that would have, at a minimum, sent that game into overtime. You can say that the officials had a tough spot as it relates to Georgia on that final play. You can say all those things. Doesn't matter. They should have won the game. And I think that, that's Georgia is not the first team to be favored and lose. South Carolina got blown out. They were a double-digit favorite. Southern California came to Boston College and lost. They were a 17-point favorite. But there's no margin for error now. At least there's not much of one. And they're going to need South Carolina to lose a couple games, which I think they probably will. But I think that doesn't matter. You just got to focus on what is you. And if you can do that in your Georgia, you'll still wind up in Atlanta. So, all right, Dean Legge's show for the week of Georgia's game against Troy.